Check, 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 check. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, check. Well, hey, everybody. Mike Griffith here. Welcome to tonight's Ingles on the Beat. Really excited about our show tonight. Connor Riley, my Dog Nation beat writer teammate, joins me. We're going to talk to you guys on the first half of the show about the Georgia Bulldogs. Back half, we're going to have a Cincinnati Bearcats expert tell us everything, give us all the insight, all the backstory, and explain why this is not the biggest game in Cincinnati history. At least not yet. Only if they win, he said. Only if they win. Connor, welcome back. I know last week you were off, about as off as you ever get. I still saw you were reading everything and popping in and even contributing on Saturday. I think you're still supposed to be off. It has to be energizing, though, Connor. No, we finally got a game again. How excited are you about this week's bowl coverage and getting to see Georgia play again on Friday?
Yeah, we've covered a couple of regular big bowl games, last two Sugar Bowls. But I would say even though Cincinnati is a group of 5 opponent, there does, I would tend to guess, seem to be a little bit more energy about this team, about this week, really about this game on Saturday. One, just because Georgia's game against Vanderbilt at the end of the season got washed away in pretty unfair fashion. And 2, I think maybe more so than those last 2 where they were coming off a loss in the SEC championship game, this game really feels, in my opinion, like a chance to really build towards the 2021 season, as opposed to really trying to avoid the hangover from the disappointment that came before it. So I think there's a chance to sort of show what Georgia could be next year and highlight some of the outgoing seniors that are going to play in this game. And I think there's a real excitement that even against Texas and Baylor wasn't necessarily there.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think it goes back to the passing game. I mean, this is kind of what we've all been waiting for. There's always been, 2017, there was a pass because it was Chubb and Michelle and nobody beat them. They looked virtually unbeatable, save one bad day at Auburn, and really should have won the national title. We cover that ground over and over, but it is what it is. And then you started thinking, now Jake Fromm's coming back. He's a sophomore. He had some NFL receivers, number 5 in the nation in passing efficiency. The passing offense looked adequate most of the year, but they fell short again. And then I think last year, 2019, most of the season, Connor, was kind of a disappointment until really, George Pickens went off. Matt Rule, I think he was somewhere in Charlotte interviewing the first half of that game, forgot to cover George Pickens, and Pickens had, 12 for 165 or 100, some ridiculous number. And it was exciting, but you thought to yourself, they can't maintain that. And then this year was just such a drag for the offense. It was just so hard to watch Georgia after that Auburn game until JT Daniels. And you've written a lot about JT, and I've written a lot about JT, but I think that is what's really fueling a lot of this, is that JT Daniels has kind of provided a glimpse maybe into Georgia finally having that offense of the future, right?
Mm-hmm. Right, because all there's been a lot. We've written and talked a lot about opt-outs, who's going to play in this game, who's not. Eric Stokes officially announced it today. He's headed to the NFL draft, Mr. Kirby had sort of said on Saturday. He was not going to be playing in this game. We're all assuming that JT Daniels is coming back this year. It's been widely reported that that is what is going to end up happening. And you look at the best playmakers that he has to throw the ball to. George Pickens is a sophomore. Karis Jackson is a redshirt sophomore. Jermaine Burton is a freshman. Darnell Washington is a freshman. All those guys are coming back next year, in addition to getting a full healthy year out of Arian Smith, healthy Marcus Rosemy-Jacksain, a healthy Dominic Blaylock, though I'm not necessarily as high as what we see out of him next year. But you have all that receiving talent coming back. For the first time, maybe really since Kirby Smart took over, it feels like the passing game is sustainable from being good enough, at least during this final stretch run of the season, to being something that can actually be relied on to move the ball and win Georgia football games, because I would say the past year and a half, that has not been the case for them. And if they show this against a Cincinnati team that, based on yards per play, is the best defense in the country. Now, obviously, the quality of opponent factors into that there. But this is going to be, I think, a legitimate test for JT Daniels on Friday. And I'll be really interested to see what he does and how he plays against Cincinnati.
Yeah, Cincinnati's defense is a little different, Connor. They're going to play, just watching Cincinnati, they don't like to give up that back shoulder throw that JT is so good at. And Kirby even said this defense is different than what you can't say they compare to, Team X or Team Y. They do things a little bit different. I think that's going to challenge the Georgia receivers. And just watching them against Tulsa, and I know we're talking pass, but it almost looks like this is the kind of game Georgia's going to start pounding until Cincinnati comes up and forces them to do something different. I mean, if they can make a living, with the Zamir White, send-off game or highlight game or whatever, I think they'll give it to Zamir 21 times until Cincinnati stops them, because that keeps Desmond Ritter off the field. So I think they're going to have to do some different things. I look for guys like Darnell. I think Darnell Washington will be a big factor, especially now. You mentioned opt-outs, Connor. We'll go over those just right now. Trey McKitty is one. Kirby revealed on the call that Trey had really been, I guess he's certainly been getting treatment on that knee that he had surgery on, but maybe wants to get that knee healthy. Ben Cleveland is out. Ben named a third-team All-American today. Apparently, we didn't know this, but Ben has been having a little bit of a soft shoulder, wants to get that shoulder right. Monty Rice. We watched Monty struggle at times with the foot injury. Somehow he was still a Butkus Award finalist. I think that says a lot for the Georgia name, because he certainly wasn't one of the three best linebackers this year based on performance. But maybe career-wise, Monty done a lot. But Monty's out. You mentioned Eric Stokes. That story up now. Eric has made it official that he's leaving. I think we knew that when he was opting out. Trey Hill won't be back in time from the knee surgeries. A name that Kirby didn't mention, and I'm merely speculating on, because when he talked about replacements for Eric Stokes, he went right to Jalen Kimber and Amir Speed. He didn't say anything about DJ Daniel. Makes me think that DJ Daniel may not play in this game. The big news the other night was that Azeez Ojulari, after apparently considering opting out, and we had some sources that said, yes, he was thinking about it, has decided that he's not going to. Connor, you just get the feeling that, the scene that I see happening is like they all come back Saturday from Christmas and they meet. And some of the guys are talking and they're thinking they're going to go to Kirby's office afterward and tell the coach they're not playing. And then Kirby gives this impassioned speech about, Richard LeCounte's going to be practicing guys one last time, seniors, and all of a sudden guys are looking at each other like they don't want to be the one going up to that office and telling Coach Smart that they're not going to play that game. That's my thinking of what probably happened, because there'd been a lot of speculation the previous week.
Right. I think back to last year, obviously Thomas and Wilson both opt out, but DeAndre Swift clearly not healthy for that Sugar Bowl, still dealing with, at the time, was a shoulder injury. Goes through practices, goes through the bowl experience, plays 2 plays in that game. One of them was a flea flicker, and then he got 1 carry on sort of a hurry up after that. But I think that's sort of maybe a template that these guys can follow still, because I do think that they want to be with the team this week. I do think that, even though they not necessarily want to go through all the practice and what leads up to it, they still want to be around their guys, their teammates, their friends, their brothers. So I don't know if Azeez is going to play the full game reps that he usually does, but I do think it means something for him to be there for one last time, to be there with his teammates. And, regarding the opt-outs, a lot of the guys you just mentioned, all with the exception of Eric Stokes, are all going to play in the Senior Bowl. And in a year where NFL scouts didn't get out as much, I think the Senior Bowl this year is a lot more valuable to the guys going there, because it's a chance to really, for scouts to get a real up-close look at these guys when they haven't had a chance to do that all year, really. And so that opportunity, I think, to get healthy and make sure you are 100% ready to go for that audition, I think that played a bigger factor than usual for these guys opting out of this game.
Yeah, interestingly enough, tonight, Malik Herring kind of threw it out there. If I even leave, it's like, wait a minute, I thought you accepted a Senior Bowl invite. So could Malik Herring be considering coming back? And we don't know about Jordan Davis. Jordan Davis was asked today if he was going to return for his senior year, said he hadn't even thought about it yet. But he did say, that he was going to have to buy his mom an air fryer, which was bumming him out. And I'm thinking, if he's going pro, he wouldn't have any problem affording an air fryer. We'll see how that works out. There's been some news last week, Connor. The Senior Bowl executive director said that Devontae Wyatt was going back to Georgia. That was a surprise. Devontae, a senior that was drafted. You start putting it together, and you covered it well earlier when we talked about all the receivers and, the thought that JT will probably come back. No definite there yet, but right now that's the speculation. And you say, boy, this offensive line's looking pretty mobile. The backfield's so crowded, it's almost like you need Zamir to go, because Milton and McIntosh and Dejon, these guys want, that's a lot of guys back there. Somebody's going to leave, whether it's Zamir going pro or somebody transferring. All those guys can't possibly fit in that package next year. But you look at defense now. Devontae Wyatt, stud. You got to think Julian Rochester's coming back after the knee surgery. I still think Malik will go, even though he kind of played around. But Jordan Davis,
Yeah,
I
would agree.
kind of wonder about. And then in the secondary, your thoughts there? There's a lot of rebuilding, Connor, in the secondary.
Right. So I actually, if JT Daniels is obviously 1A player, you get to bring him back, you do so. Jordan Davis is 1B because if he comes back next year, teams just aren't going to be able to run the ball on Jordan. You saw it in the Missouri game. You wrote about it. How when he's out there, teams just can't move him. You will not be able to run the ball. And with all that Georgia has to replace in their secondary next year, getting a guy like Jordan Davis back is huge because it puts, I think, a lot less pressure on that secondary to be as good as it does because it can sort of make teams one-dimensional. Mark Webb's going to be gone. DJ Daniels going to be gone. Stokes is already declared. Richard LeCount is gone. Tyson Campbell, I asked him today why it was important to play in the game. Based on the answer he gave, I kind of think like he sounds like he's gone. That's a lot to replace in your secondary. Now, you're going to get a look at either Jalen Kimber, Darren Branch, or Amir Speed at one of the cornerback spots. A guy I'm really interested watching and how he's used in this game is Tyrique Stevenson because I think he's a guy who, if they want to play him at corner, he's got the athletic ability to do so. He's also a guy you can maybe move around and play at safety. You've got a guy like Keely Ringo coming back from injury, and then you've got some signees coming in Nyland Green, Kamari Lassiter, and then potentially Terrion Arnold if they land him. So where the depth will be fine, but early on, especially that first game of the year against Clemson, that secondary is going to be a massive question mark, and I'll be really interested to see how they sort everything out back there.
Yeah, it will be fun, and you got to think that Kirby in Georgia is going to get somebody out of that transfer portal. I know scholarships are at a premium. We're still looking at the attrition numbers. You don't really know how it's going to shape up. One thing's for sure, though, is that Kirby is done talking about opt-outs. This is something, he put his foot down. And I think these coaches like
in your mouth,
in my mouth, telling everybody doesn't know where they get information. But I think in their world, when Kirby speaks, there's nobody in that building that's going to argue with him. So when people on the outside have a different perception, it's like he doesn't know what to do with it. He said, "Guys opting out is not a trend." It is, Coach. I know. No, he doesn't want it to be a trend.
Yeah,
he certainly doesn't want it to be a trend at Georgia, where the last 3 years you've had at least one captain opt out. And as much as Kirby publicly supports his players and loves them, there's a part of him that dies every time because Kirby was the kind of player himself. You had to drag him off the field. He didn't ever want to leave special teams, his NFL tryout. Now, this is hard for guys like Kirby Smart to accept. So I think I caught some of that anger and frustration, and that's okay. I said, look, it's the end of the year, and Kirby even said it today. The elasticity of the 2020 year is stretched like a rubber band right now, and everybody is ready to just bust. The good news, Connor, is I think this Georgia team is really primed. I know a big question has been the effort. You were on some of those calls as well today. I got the feeling these guys are really jacked up about this game.
Yeah, I don't believe motivation is a concern in this game. I think these guys want to play in here. I think they're well aware of what has happened the last two times a Power 5 team has played a Group of 5 team in this bowl game. I believe it was 2015 or 16. I forget which actual day of the year it fell on. Houston beats Florida State pretty badly by 2 touchdowns. And then in 2018, when Georgia's getting ready to play in the Rose Bowl, Central Florida beats Auburn. I don't think Georgia wants that same stigmatism with them. I think a lot of people know that are riding on Georgia to sort of beat Cincinnati to push back this narrative that the Group of 5 can and should play for a national title. Because Cincinnati, based on resume and paper, they've done everything they can to make a case there. But this is a real chance for them to go up against a legitimate big boy in Georgia and sort of make a stronger case for that next year. So I actually believe that Georgia very much wants to win this game, go out on top. They win this game. Florida had a couple of big opt-outs today. Kadarius Toney is gone. Trayvon Grimes, another receiver, is gone, in addition to Kyle Pitts already. I think Kirby would really like it a lot if Florida has its sort of best year in a long time, and Georgia still ends up finishing ranked in the final season rankings ahead of them.
Yeah, Marco Wilson, the latest to opt out.
Yep.
So I guess, I don't know. I don't have a shoe joke I can throw out there fast. I didn't, I guess he won't be the heel in this game. I can't think of a good enough joke. But looking at Cincinnati, I was looking at the highlights of Jared Dokes, their runner, and he reminded me a lot of Dejon Edwards. And look, these guys, they run hard, but he doesn't make enough people miss. I'm worried about this guy. If he's going to go head first into this defensive front, I don't know if he's going to come out the other side of it, and Desmond, this, player of the year, Desmond Ritter at 6'4", 215. I mean, you can run, but you can't hide. I mean, he's probably the guy that was the most upset to hear that Azeez Ojulari is coming back. I mean, and part of me, Connor, also believes this, and Kirby said this on his teleconference the other day. He said that, he didn't just pull this number out of his behind. 58 out of 64 top picks played me. That message was delivered. And he probably told guys like Azeez, like Tyson Campbell, look, you can skip this game or you can play in it and make a lot of money. Because these guys, I believe, are going to feast on that Cincinnati offensive line. They just haven't seen a defensive front, Connor, like what they're going to encounter in these Bulldogs.
Yeah, Azeez is a guy who's really jumped up the draft rankings recently. He's a guy who's got a great get-off. And in a year where the edge rushers aren't all that great, if you can leave a really strong end-of-season tape on top of leading an SEC team in sacks for 2 consecutive seasons, I think that's a really good impression to leave going into a draft, especially when Azeez is obviously a good athlete, but he is not, a transcendent, chiseled Brenton Cox type player where he is just all athleticism. So I think if Azeez comes out and plays really well in this game, it's going to help him a lot draft stock-wise. The guy I'm sort of really interested to watch is Nakobe Dean in this game because officially no Monty Rice at all in this game. And the thing that we've always sort of mentioned with Nakobe is it's clear he's a very good player. He will, in my opinion, he'll probably be a first-team All-SEC linebacker when we start things next season. Can he make that Roquan jump where he goes from obviously a good player, which he was as a sophomore this year, to a true game wrecker, a true destroyer of worlds? And I think this is a good opportunity against Cincinnati to do it. They're going to try and spread him out, which I actually think plays into Nakobe's favor. He's going to have a big-time matchup against a guy like Desmond Ritter. And if Nakobe Dean has a really good game against Cincinnati, I think that says a lot for what he might be able to do in 2021.
And I think he needs to, Connor. I think we all predicted that Nakobe would make a jump. And early on, it looked like, I don't know, it makes me wonder, is there some mystery injury we don't know about? Because he was starting to get subbed in and out for a little bit. I want to see Nakobe take that next step too. I think he's the guy that needs to your point. Again, I thought Monty did yeoman's work and was certainly serviceable and blue collar, but he was never if there's one thing George is missing, it's a dynamic playmaking linebacker. I mean, you can't have it all. Well, you got the great nose tackle, you got the great edge rusher. Right. I think Trayvon Walker and Malik Herring are both very strong defensive ends. Richie LeCount was going to be an All-American. You really hated to see his whole season go down the drain with the motorcycle. Lewis Seen is probably the most intimidating hitter I've seen in the SEC in a long time, shades of Greg Blue, right? You had the two cover corners in Campbell and Stokes. But the linebacker position, and to me, I mean, that's what got exposed against Florida. Florida killed him on the wheel route. To me, that's the area for all the linebackers they've recruited, other than the outside linebacker, which really is more of a D end. I don't see that guy in the middle that just makes the interception or forces the fumble. So I'm on it with you, man. I agree that I think that Nakobe needs to be that guy. I wonder a little bit about Sherman, coming. He show us a little something, right?
Yeah, because he's a guy. Because he's going to play in this game, but I'm still interested to see how much we know. Jermaine Johnson. Yeah. That's going to be a chance, I think, for more of Sherman, more of Nolan Smith, and more of Adam Anderson. I'll be really interested to see what those three guys do in this game. Because if Azeez does take fewer snaps in this game, I think it's going to be a big move towards saying, "Hey, Azeez, thanks for coming out. We appreciate you. We love that you were here for practice. You're going to be a great player, hopefully a first-round draft pick for us." And then we're going to sort of showcase guys like Nolan Smith, guys like MJ Sherman, and Adam Anderson for what Georgia's pass rush might look like next year.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm looking at some of the comments. I see people talking about wanting top badges. Connor, do you know how to do it? Because I don't even know how to. What is the top? Can you explain the top badge? Because I don't understand it.
It was some Facebook thing. They tried it out a year and a half ago to try to get people more invested. And it, like everything Facebook touches, was sort of a disaster.
Speaking of disasters, everybody keeps saying, Mike Handel and Kirby, oh my God. Listen, this is the job, man. If you are going to swim with the sharks and you're going to reach between the bars to pet the tiger, you're going to get bit. If you're going to have opinions, if you're going to be aggressive writing stories, but and Connor, you've done this as well. I know for years in college, but sometimes you write stories. Coaches don't always agree and they don't necessarily like the reporting. Now in Kirby's world, can't you guys just wait don't report anything. You'll see who's going to be there on game day. And it's like, look, we've got people asking us every day, who's going to play, who's going to play, who's going to play. And I'll give the guys credit on the beat. There's a lot of good reporters at Georgia, and Rivals and 24/7 and Athens Banner Herald. They break news, and they have it before us sometimes. And when they do, we say, according to so-and-so, and then we try to confirm with our sources. And when we have the confirmation, we report it. We're not trying to step on any toes. We're not trying to hurt any feelings. And if a guy changes his mind and decides to play, that's the breaks. Them's the breaks, yep. Right? So, Connor, I've been through it. I didn't take it personal. Kirby Smart is an incredibly successful coach, but he's a guy that's at the end of his rope. If we're being honest, This has been an incredibly difficult year. And I don't know about you, Connor, but I've read between the lines, Kirby is really, really worried about these COVID tests this week.
Yeah, Georgia, I think, has done a really, really good job of managing COVID as best it can. But the concern they sent guys home for Christmas, which was absolutely the right thing to do because of the sacrifices they had made and been away from their families for so long. But the back end of that is you run the risk of, okay, I can trust player X. I can't trust player X's uncle. And you just open yourself up more to that. I think there's a real Kirby, one, I think him reacting the way he is and saying what he says about COVID is really upset about that Vanderbilt game not getting played. Two, I think he just wants to get to the finish line. Georgia, SEC teams, I believe 69 out of 71 SEC games are played this year. These guys just want to get to the finish line. And to get this close and to have really this last big hurdle of sending guys home, having them come back, traveling again for essentially a road game. It's not really a bowl game at this point. It's one last little strain on a year that has already been incredibly stressful. And as far as what transpired Saturday night, a little inside baseball here. Might just happen to be the first one to get asked have to ask a question. I feel like Kirby would have gone off on whoever reported it that night. But it is good to know that Kirby Smart reads Dog Nation, as all of you should, for the latest in Georgia news. So, I certainly understand Kirby's frustration and where it comes from and everything that is sort of flying around this time of year. Because 2020 has been really tough from both, covering its standpoint and from trying to get a team of 85 guys through a season healthy, COVID-free, and playing as many football games as they can.
Yeah, no doubt. And really, Connor, this is just kind of part of the whole new video thing. I mean, let me tell you, I can't – I've had Gene Stallings stare, holes in me and scare me to death, literally, where I drove back from Mobile thinking that he was going to have somebody kill me because I wrote something. I've had, Bruce Pearl slam a door in my face, after they lost the game. And I was like, hey, coach, wham. I was like, what the, I have had Izzo call me up and tell me that he's, what he's done to reporters like me before. And you're going, whoa, does he connect it to the mind? It just coaches. These are super competitive people. And I'll tell you, Connor, we should have been suspicious. When we're minding our own business on a Saturday and Claude Felton, the Hall of Fame SID, goes, hey guys, Coach Smart wants to have a conference and get a few questions out of the way. That should have been the clue. Wait a minute. When does Kirby ever really want to talk to us? That should have been the clue, right? That something when the guy says, hey there, how about we just step outside the club for a minute and have a word? Sure, why not? What could go wrong? Listen, Kirby Smart was ready to get a piece of some beat writer ass, and I got it, and good, and like I said, I'm good with it. It's part of the business and it happens. But I will say this, now that everything's on video and now there's this new etiquette, Zoom etiquette, the coach reporter relationships will I think they'll be different. I just think Kirby, he had what he had to say. He's a guy that's very direct. Like, I still respect him. He said what was on his mind. He got it out of the way. Today we had a Zoom. Over. That's just what it is with Kirby. He moves on, and that's the way I look at it. So it's funny. We've been talking about this on our Twitter, but hey, listen, and social media. But this football game was a lot more interesting than a slow Saturday night when a coach chews out a beat writer, because that happens in America every day. Connor, let me ask you about this game. And I know we're going to do Cover 4 Thursday, and I know you've got your show tomorrow night, so I really appreciate you coming on. But what was kind of your knee-jerk reaction to this game? We've been thinking about it, but when you think about what has Georgia got to do to win, what were some of the things that grabbed you right out of the box?
Yeah, I think the thing, again, that I'm just most interested in seeing is what does JT Daniels do against this defense? For those that don't know, Marcus Freeman is Cincinnati's defensive coordinator, and Luke Fickell's already a well-regarded defensive coach, and I think he's someone who is on his way to running a big-time Power 5 program. It would not surprise me in the slightest if Michigan comes calling for him in a year when they decide he's had enough of Jim Harbaugh. Marcus Freeman is a name to know because he might be coming to the SEC sooner rather than later. He is a name that has been tied to the LSU opening. He's a young defensive coordinator. He's someone who I think is going to be very attractive, and there's a reason LSU is trying to go after him. So admittedly, it's probably a bigger test than what he has seen against the likes of Mississippi State, South Carolina, and Missouri from just a scheme standpoint, because as you point out before, they do stuff different. But I trust Georgia's defense to be good enough to slow down a team like Cincinnati, even though statistically they look more like Alabama and Florida than, say, Missouri or Auburn. But really, I'm interested in how good can JT Daniels in this passing offense look? Because if they do look good, I think it sets up a chance, or at least an argument, that Georgia should be the number one ranked team in the country when the polls start next season, just because of what we know about quarterbacks and what we know about offenses. Yes, obviously, we touched on the secondary potential defensive concerns early. But with all that Georgia brings back and with all that we have seen, and with Alabama losing most of their offensive line, receivers, and quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence is gone. They're losing their top two wide receivers along with Travis Etienne. Ohio State's probably going to lose most of their offensive line and Justin Fields as well. You take all that into account, Georgia still has clearly a talent advantage over most teams in the country. If JT Daniels goes out and plays like he has in those first three games, I think there's a real case to be made that Georgia is, again, one of the best teams in the country, especially with all that they bring back on offense next year.
Yeah, no doubt. I'll tell you what I wonder about. I wonder about the staff. I wonder if there's going to be some changes. I wonder if there's going to be some tinkering, if some guys are going to get other jobs. So far, everything looks pretty solid, but I think there's still kind of a second half of silly season ahead after these major bowl games. I get the feeling Dan Lanning will be back, but boy, when he was doing his Zoom today, I just kept thinking, man, this guy's a head coach. This guy is good. He is so smooth. And I know this year hasn't gone perfect in those two games especially, but I still think Dan Lanning is – I'm surprised that somebody hasn't gone after Glenn Schumann as a defensive coach. Maybe they have and we don't know. That's another thing. You never really know what's going on in that building. What happened before that teleconference or what happened after it. I just get the feeling there's a lot going on. We talk about the players. What about the staff? Is everybody okay on Kirby's staff? Because I'm telling you, this COVID thing, and he's been very disciplined, and George has done as good a job as anybody. But I could just detect, and my Kirby radar was up, and I study this guy as close as anybody. The way he brought up COVID, I mean, he was almost shaken. There was something there, Connor, and I don't know what it was.
Yeah, it sounds like he, at least on the front end, he obviously doesn't know anything, and they're going to test. They tested when they got back Saturday. I believe they got tested again today, and they're going to test again on Wednesday, to my knowledge. I believe that it's the testing protocols for this week. It sounds like it's like he's just preparing to know that some guys are going to be out of this game because of COVID, which is just unfortunately the reality we have to live with. Tennessee and South Carolina had to cancel bowl games. Missouri came out yesterday. They're going to have to opt out of their bowl game. It's obviously a real issue that hundreds of thousands of Americans have died of this disease. And it is something that continues to creep into the American life. And the Georgia football program is no exception to that.
Yeah, I think there's going to be 17 or 18,000, 25% capacity at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. As far as game points, that's something else to look for. Cincinnati, 9 false starts in their last game in the AAC championship. This is a team that's a little rusty. To me, that's the final winning edge. Not just do I like the matchup on paper, but the fact if you look at when Cincinnati's played their games, they haven't played a lot of football lately. And I feel like it's going to take them a while to adjust to playing a team like Georgia, bigger, faster, stronger. And we can end some of this senseless talk of, oh, yeah, Coastal Carolina should have been the play. Coastal Carolina would have got ran out of the stadium by half of the Tennessee would beat Coastal Carolina. Connor's going to go, wait a minute, Mike. I don't know about Tennessee. Speaking of Tennessee, I knew you were going to go there. Does Jeremy Pruitt keep his job?
This year, yes. And I actually think them not playing a bowl game is a good thing for him because not that I think Tennessee would have lost their game against West Virginia, but it potentially keeps an embarrassment from happening and them just saying, you know what, let's just get rid of Jeremy Pruitt now. But I don't think there's a coach in the SEC, which is the hottest conference in the country, that enters the 2021 season on a hotter seat than Jeremy Pruitt. Maybe you can make a case for Ed Orgeron at LSU, given just all the turnover we continue to see there, along with the off-field sexual assault allegations that he's mishandled, and really a litany of issues that have gone on there at LSU. But if Jeremy Pruitt and Jim Chaney to an extent as well, if they don't get that quarterback situation right next year, it's going to be a really tough year there, because you've seen some flashes out of both Harrison Bailey and Brian Maurer, but Tennessee needs to just figure out that quarterback position, because it's year 4 now, and next year it will be all of his guys. You cannot blame Butch Jones anymore. Not that I think you ever should have in the first place, which I know they took plenty of shots at.
Yeah.
They have to get it right next year and show improvement, because again, they had a tougher schedule. I think when things got redrawn, they got Auburn and A&M over from the West. They just have to show improvement and show that, hey, we're maybe a year away from joining Florida and Georgia and get to an easy 8-win, 9-win schedule.
Yeah. Rodney Hewitt on the YouTube channel, Connor, asking us about Kenny McIntosh, Kendall Milton. I don't know if Kendall Milton is going to play. I saw him in the video. Mm-hmm. It's almost like they don't really need him to, because I think, I think this is the Zamir White going away part. I think this is a chance to feature Zeus, get him some good film, help him get drafted is kind of my thought. But beyond that, I don't know if Kendall will be back. And then you look at next year, and I don't know, you were closer to Chubb and Michelle than 2017. I only did a few Georgia games in 2017, but is Milton McIntosh, could that be another Chubb and Michelle kind of situation, with Kenny being Michelle, the South Florida guy that can run and catch, and Milton being the bruising back like Chubb?
No, I don't think so. As much as you might like Kenny McIntosh, and as much as Sony Michel has been a little bit of an NFL disappointment, Sony Michel was a really, really good college football player. And I think even at this point, Sony Michel ran for 1,000 yards when Nick Chubb suffered that horrific knee injury in 2015. So he was pretty clearly a competent running back on his own. And I mean, Nick Chubb is statistically, I believe, either the best or second best running back to ever play for Georgia. So as good as Kendall Milton is, and Chubb's, I believe, the second best running, in my opinion, he's second best running back in the NFL right now behind Derrick Henry. So to expect Milton and McIntosh to become that, I don't know. Now, if somehow Georgia brings back Zamir White and James Cook, I think that might have a certain flavor and feel to Chubb and Michelle, especially because they were a very big leadership part of that 2017 team. They both could have gone pro after the 2016 season. They made it a point to come back to Georgia for another year, for the last year there. And I would not be – I don't believe it's going to happen. Georgia signed another running back. I don't think they're going to go into next year with 6 scholarship running backs. But if you're looking for the Chubb-Michelle parallel, sort of, it would be White and Cook coming back, which I think would just be all the icing on top of the icing on the cake.
And this is why me and Connor are great, because sometimes when we disagree, we really disagree. But I love it. I think somebody just flashed on this message screen that Georgia's a basketball school now, Connor, because they're 7-0 and they beat Cincinnati. That tells me it's time to go. Actually, I want to take a minute. I want to thank our sponsor, Ingles. When I come back, I'm going to have someone from 24/7 that covers Cincinnati football. You're going to love him. His name is Chad Brendel. Chad is going to tell us all about the Bearcats, why this isn't the biggest game in Bearcat history. And if any of you know what game it is, I'll be very impressed, because I didn't know it when he told me. And it was since 2000. So, but in all seriousness, we do need to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Ingles. They've done such a tremendous job supporting not just this show, but supporting our society. Connor and I talked earlier about the pandemic and Kirby's concern and how it's affected the team. It's affected all of our lives. And we've needed these frontline workers to continue to get us our supplies and help us stay nourished and get our groceries and our medical supplies. And it's the folks at Ingles that have made that happen. Let's take this moment. When I come back, Chad Brendel, thanks for joining me, Connor. And let's take this moment to appreciate our sponsor, Ingles.
It's in our hearts to feel for you. There's been ups and downs, turnarounds, good days and some bad. But we stand together for worse and for better. We'll always have your back, with open arms, heart to heart, hand in hand. Community strong.
And I welcome Chad Brendel to the show. As promised, he covered the Cincinnati Bearcats. The last 15 years, Chad, I got to tell you, I've seen some great coaches come through Cincinnati. Obviously, Mark D'Antonio, coach I covered at Michigan State. Brian Kelly obviously had great success there. Butch Jones had a lot of success at Cincinnati. But Luke Fickell, I'll tell you, he's got an air about him. I really like this guy. And it's not like he's just jumped out of there. Like, he's sticking. He's had opportunities to lead. Tell us more about Luke Fickell and what's made him so successful.
I compare Luke Fickell to remember when you were like in your 20s and you had that one uncle that you always loved to hang out with at the 4th of July, and you were just kind of drawn to him and had a couple beers and you just had a great time. That's Luke Fickell. I've been covering Cincinnati for 15 years. I've been doing this for 25 years. I started at Marshall covering Chad Pennington and Randy Moss and those guys. I've never met a more normal head coach, a guy that's just, he is who he is. He's not trying to be something else. He's not trying to impress you. He's very straightforward. I think that's part of the reason that kids love him as much as they do, is that there's no games. There's no beating around the bush. You know exactly where you stand. If he's not happy with you, you're well aware of it. And for the most part, you know, he goes about his business. Everybody knows the expectations. They know what is, you know, what the vision, his vision for this program is and has been since he got here. So I think when you have a head coach that is like that, and I get a lot of that sense from kind of Kirby as well. When you have a head coach that's pretty clear in his vision and pretty clear in his message every day, it's a lot easier for everybody to get on the same page and to have the type of success that he's having at Cincinnati. And it's also, it's traditional football. There's no gimmicks, you know, when you talk about like a UCF and their offense, exactly as Kirby Smart said, when you talk about Cincinnati, you're talking about a top 10 defense, a top 15 offense, one of the best special teams units in the country. That's just not something you see from a group of 5 team to be built with such stability and effectiveness across the board.
Yeah, across the board, that is the key. They seem like there's really nothing Cincinnati doesn't do well, and they've had so much success. And again, you've been there a long time. I know they've played in 2 New Year's 6 level bowls before, the Orange and the Sugar. Haven't won one. Is it overkill to say this could be the biggest game in Cincinnati football history? Is that too much?
I mean, it's a bowl game, so it makes it a little bit different. I would say the biggest game in Cincinnati history, and I won't say regardless of what happens on Saturday or Friday, because who knows how it plays out. The biggest game in Cincinnati history is, it's going to be very difficult to dethrone the Cincinnati Pitt Big East championship game from 2009, where they were down 31-10 and came back and won that game in Heinz Field. I mean, we celebrate. If you remember that game, Tony Pike was the quarterback. He threw a touchdown pass to Armand Benz with about a minute left to take the lead on Pittsburgh. And literally every year, December 6th is Pike to Ben. It's Pike to Ben's Day in Cincinnati. They had a bobblehead that commemorated it. I mean, that game kind of marked like Cincinnati, because for 100 years, Cincinnati was an afterthought in football. And Mark D'Antonio started that progress. Brian Kelly really accelerated that progress. And that game, finishing a season undefeated, beating a highly ranked Pittsburgh team to do it. That game was kind of, you know, the stepping stone for Cincinnati football can be a factor. And it's a team or a program that's here to stay. That one would be tough to beat. I think it could definitely, with a win, you got to put it over the Orange Bowl with Virginia Tech, where they just didn't play well. The Sugar Bowl, Brian left. I mean, that was such, you know, you had the office assistant, Brian Kelly's assistant, and she's still there. Her husband was on the sidelines as a coach that game.
Oh, jeez.
And to say that team enjoyed themselves on Bourbon Street leading up to the game would be a bit of an understatement. And then you're playing a Tim Tebow Florida team that was maybe the best non-championship team like in the past 20 years. And they were real angry that they didn't get in. And Carlos Dunlap, he just left Cincinnati, but he was with the Bengals for all those years. And he gave Tony Pike a lot of problems that day. And Tony had built a fake grudge with Carlos, because Tony covers, he's in the sports media, he covers the Bengals now, and he would always play it off like, you know, he and Carlos had beef. Carlos didn't know who he was. So I think it could definitely jump up to second. First is one of those wins that you know, there was probably 20,000 UC fans in the upper deck at Heinz Field, and everybody in Cincinnati talks about, you know, Pike to Benz.
No doubt. Hey, you know, right now, a guy everybody's talking about in Cincinnati has got to be Desmond Ritter. I mean, what a dual threat. I don't think Georgia's seen a quarterback like Desmond this year. And just watching the AAC championship game, as bad as that weather was, he still looked dynamic. I mean, he runs for almost 100 yards. He throws for over 200. And a guy that's really grown. I mean, it's 6'4", 215. He strikes me as a guy who maybe we'll be watching in the NFL. Tell me about Desmond Ritter and the challenges that he'll present against Georgia.
Well, it's a great story, ultimately, because Des was a two-star recruit right in Louisville's backyard. He played at Louisville St. X, as one of the big time programs in Kentucky high school football history. The only other offer he had besides Cincinnati was Eastern Kentucky. And Zach Taylor, who is the Bengals head coach now, was actually the quarterback coach at Cincinnati. He went on a tour of like 8 different quarterbacks, and he came back from that and said, I found my guy. And when he said who, everybody was like, there were some pretty talented like kids with a lot of offers that he had seen through these 8 kids. He came home and Desmond Ritter's my guy, really the 2-star kid that Eastern Kentucky's his only offer. And then the coaching change happened. And it would have been pretty easy for Fickle to leave him out and move on from him, but he decided to stick with him. And ever since he got in the program, there was a leadership quality. Even his true freshman year, if he hadn't dealt with some injury issues, there's some talk that he would have probably played his true freshman year. And then he comes in as a redshirt freshman, comes in on the 3rd series of the game in the Rose Bowl at UCLA, a game where UCLA is heavily favored, and leads Cincinnati to victory, and he's never turned back. I mean, he's on pace to become statistically, outside of the only name he's probably not going to pass in the Cincinnati record books is his quarterback coach. I don't know if you remember Gino Guidugli.
I remember Gino Guidugli. I do.
Dez has thrown for, in 3 years, Dez has thrown for a little over 6,000 yards. Gino threw for 11,000 yards in his 4 years as a starter at Cincinnati. So Dez is going to get all the records. He ain't getting that one. But
I want to say, wasn't Tennessee after Gino Guidugli for a little while?
A lot of people were after Gino Guidugli, and he was committed to Kentucky. Okay. And for whatever reason, that fell apart, and he ended up deciding he wanted to stay home. He almost, if you remember back, the 2002 Ohio State national championship team, Gino Guidugli had 4 plays in the red zone to win that game, Cincinnati against Ohio State. And they just couldn't get the touchdown. If they would have got the touchdown, it changes the course of history. That Ohio State team doesn't win a championship. So, but Gino's back as the quarterback coach now, and he still lets them know. He'll point to the guys like in the Ring of Honor. Like, I'm there, you're here. Like
I get the feeling that that Ahmad Gardner might be in that Ring of Honor before it's over with. I mean, here's this All-American cornerback. I know he's tied for second in the AAC in passes defended. He's 4th with 3 picks. I mean, tell me about this sticky cover guy. And do you think they'll put him on George Pickens one-on-one? Is he that kind of shutdown guy where they'll just put him on the best guy and say, take care of it?
Yeah, that's where he's at. I mean, Ahmad came in middle of the road, 3-star cornerback out of Michigan. I still have no clue how Michigan and Michigan State didn't go on this kid. I mean,
right.
He's long, he's athletic, he has go gadget arms when the ball is in the air. Pro Football Focus has it is better to throw the ball in the dirt than it is to throw the ball at Ahmad Gardner. That's his quarterback rating is under 30 on passes thrown his way. And yeah, that's the main thing in Marcus Freeman's defense that allows them to be so effective, is that they just put Ahmad Gardner on whoever the boundary wide receiver is, and they don't give him much help. They don't do much over the top for him. They say, this is you one-on-one. He hasn't allowed a touchdown in his college career. He has scored more touchdowns than he's allowed. So he has been a really rare guy. And it's funny because there was another member of that class. His name was Justin Harris, who has worked his way into the two deep. That Justin Harris was the number one corner in Ohio, and a kid that everybody was really high on. And as soon as they got to camp, it was pretty clear, like, this Gardner kid's a different deal. This is not something that you see all the time. And he had a pick six against Central Florida that really jump-started his career in a game that they beat Central Florida in Nippert Stadium. And from there, he hasn't looked back. He's been absolutely outstanding as a guy out wide that you just have a hard time pushing the ball down the field on him. And when you're doing that to number one receivers, especially in the American, it's a pass heavy quarterback offense friendly league. He's tested plenty. And it's gotten to the point that you're seeing guys just aren't throwing his way much anymore.
Wow. Coach Fickle spoke to us earlier on the Zoom chat, and he was talking about what he thought of Georgia, that this would be the most talented team, or the best team, I guess. I don't want to use the word most talented. Gus Malzahn did that earlier this year, and Kirby lost the gap. Kirby is one to do that of late. This has been a pressure-packed year for Kirby Smart. He's been very short at times. But I want to ask you, about that Ohio State game. Obviously, it was early last year. This Cincinnati team just looks different. There's still some that look at Cincinnati and go, well, they didn't beat Ohio State. But what would you say as far as why this group is so much different than maybe that team we saw at the start of last year against the Buckeyes?
Well, a big part of that, what happened at Ohio State is very early in that game, Chase Young, surprising, Cincinnati couldn't block Chase Young, landed on Desmond Ritter and messed up his shoulder. And it took him a couple weeks to really get right from that. And then he messed up the other shoulder against South Florida. But he wasn't right for most of that game. And not that it would have changed the outcome, but it would have definitely given them a much better chance to compete. I also think when you look back last year, James Hudson was supposed to be the starting left tackle last year, the Michigan transfer. And for whatever reason, Jim Harbaugh decided that Michigan was not going to cooperate with the transfer process. He denies that, but we have evidence that it happened. They didn't fight it, but they didn't do anything to help. And that threw off all of their plans along the offensive line. And they had to go with a 6'10" German that didn't play high school football. There was a redshirt freshman. They had to go with him at one of the tackle spots. At the other tackle spot, they had to go with the kid that was playing basketball at Miami of Ohio a year earlier and had come back to football. So he had been away from the game, and mixed with the guy that's now starting at right guard, Benny McConnell. It was just their offensive line was completely in flux. And that Ohio State team could get after the quarterback about as well as anybody we've seen with 3, 4, 5 guys, especially Chase Young. And you see wide receivers weren't very good. I mean, if you look at it, they went, and you've been doing this a long time. Have you ever seen a wide receiver room get 7 new guys in a year?
It was a very bad scene last year. I think they had 5 or 6, and it just threw the offense completely in twirl.
Yeah. So Cincinnati went out. Their wide receiver room was not great. I mean, Alec Pierce, who's their number one guy, had a good sophomore season last year, but they just didn't get much else. So they go get a transfer from Notre Dame and Michael Young. They go get a transfer from Arkansas and Jordan Jones. They bring in 5 freshmen, a couple of which that have worked their way into the rotation. And you just, they didn't have the pieces. Mike Warren was very good. Josiah DeGuara, who was drafted in the 3rd round by the Packers, was very good, but they didn't have enough weapons to keep up with Ohio State. And that's one thing about Fickle. He looked at that situation and said, we have to go get better at wide receiver. And they went out and completely revamped that room. You've seen the emergence, replacing DeGuara in Josh Wiley and Leonard Taylor, 2 kids that look like NFL tight ends already. And Wiley's 6'6", 220 pounds, and Taylor's the more physical, bigger guy. They were joking with him last summer when we were actually allowed to be on campus for things.
Right.
They said he was a biscuit short of being a tackle. but they just have more weapons, and they have more for Ritter at his disposal. He's healthy. He's playing with more confidence than he did last year. And you've definitely seen from start to end of the season, you've seen a lot of growth on this offense.
You know, you mentioned something. I think it was you that mentioned it earlier. Just the timing of Cincinnati. They've had some games canceled, and apparently Luke made a reference to 10 false starts. That wasn't in one game, was it? Was he talking about?
No, that was the AAC championship game.
They had 10 false starts in that game. I was not aware of that. Oh,
I think it was 9. I think he fudged by 1. I think it was 9. But 1, if you watch a Cincinnati press conference, Luke Fickell is relentless on giving me a hard time. So he loves picking on me. I guess it's his way of showing that he loves me. But yeah, they were off for a month, and it just didn't click, especially in that first half. They had a couple. I think on top of that, Tulsa was simulating snaps, which they got flagged for. So I think that, because it was one of those, like, normally you see guys when they point across the line, like he jumped. This wasn't like he jumped. This guy's doing something he ain't supposed to be doing by trying to signal us. And I wonder how much of that, this is what's crazy, how much of that is being able to pick up on it because there hasn't been any fans in the stands this year. So if you crank up the audio on game tape, how much do you pick up cadence and signal and things like that you weren't able to ever do before? But to Tulsa's credit, they took advantage of it and really disturbed UC's offensive line, especially in the first half of that game. The rhythm just wasn't completely there. I mean, they had 4 trips to the red zone and got 10 points, I think, which is unlike what this offense has been incredibly efficient when they've gotten near the goal line all year.
Chad, before I let you go, and we're going to do a written piece with you later this week, and I really look forward to that. I really, really enjoy your work. Anybody, and I know Georgia fans are going to want to dive head first in and read everything they can about this game. And obviously, you've got the 24/7 Cincinnati site with the Bearcat Journal. Excuse me. We just kind of your view from 10,000 feet. You find out Cincinnati's playing Georgia, and what's your gut reaction as far as, oh my gosh, Cincinnati had better do what? What do you see? What jumps out at you when you look at Georgia?
I think I would have preferred A&M.
Yeah.
Just in that, once JT Daniels emerged, it gave Georgia that complete feel that you didn't have watching them earlier in the year. Cincinnati's going to have to play the best game that they've played since Luke Fickell's been the head coach at Cincinnati. And I don't think that's going out on a limb. I mean, even with it looks like it was reported that a lot of opt-outs were possible early, but it seems like that is settled, and there's going to be a couple, but not really the number that maybe we thought when the game was announced last Sunday. So you're going to get what sounds like a pretty full-strength Georgia. You're going to get a Georgia that sounds like understands. I don't think they're going to underestimate the Cincinnati team. I know that is, the talk of when a G5 team plays a Power 5 team. Oh, they didn't take them serious. I don't get that sense. I get the sense Kirby's got these guys looking at Cincinnati and saying, we're going to have to come and play pretty well to win this game. So I think it's a game that Cincinnati can win, but they're going to have to be at their absolute best. If there's 10 false starts, you're not beating Georgia. If you don't take care of the football, you're not beating Georgia. If you're not able to get Daniels uncomfortable in the pocket, get him maybe to make a mistake or two, it's going to be very difficult. And the biggest thing, you're going to have to stop the run game because Georgia's going to want to keep Desmond Ritter and that Cincinnati offense off the field. And you kind of got 2 teams that are going to want to do that. So I don't think this is going to be one of those 4-hour football games. You know what I mean? Like where the 2 teams are throwing it 50, 60 times, Mike. I think you're going to see a pretty even run pass ratio from these 2 teams. I think you're going to see 2 teams that both really know what's at stake and are going to come out and try to win this game. And I think it should be an excellent kickoff to New Year's Day, with the game being the first one set to kick at noon. I think it's going to be an excellent football game.
Yeah, I think you're right, Chad. I think it's going to be really interesting. And Desmond Ritter is a wild card to me. I mean, this is such a playmaking guy that even with plan A doesn't work out so good, plan B is always good when it's Desmond Ritter. Chad Brendel, I thank you so much for your time. I encourage people to check you out on Twitter at Chad Brendel, Brendal. They can read you on 24/7. I want to thank our audience tonight for joining us here on our Ingles on the Beat show. Tomorrow night, Connor will be having his show. And, of course, Wednesday night, it's Jeff Sentell, Between the Hedges. And Thursday night, we do our Cover 4 podcast leading up to the big game on Thursday. Chad, thanks again, man. Can't wait to talk to you later this week, and we'll get that printed piece with you up. By Thursday, we'll see the written word of Chad. Thanks again for joining us, man.